the Tao that can be explained absolutely. It can't exist forever. A certain name is given. It can't exist forever. Nothingness, the name of heaven and earth beginning. Being, the name of all things birthing. Therefore, if nothing have, you're curious to know the secret of it. If being yours, you're also curious to know the behave of it. Nothingness and being with different names, but they are coexistent and with mystery relationship. Reaching from the mystery into the deeper mystery. This is the gate of Tao. From chapter 1, we know. Nothingness and being are the name of all things beginning and birthing. Every name, even nothingness and being, can't exist forever. So everything grows alternately. If we know the relationship of nothingness and being, we open the gate of Tao. If everyone had a standard of beauty, there arises ugliness. If everyone had a standard of goodness, this is not a good thing. Therefore, nothingness and being are interdependent growth. Difficult and easy are interdependent completion. Long and short are interdependent contrast. High and low are interdependent position. Tones and voice are interdependent harmony. Front and behind are interdependent company. Therefore the sage deals affairs at the beginning of nothingness, preaches the doctrine without words. All things growing, but he does not turn away from them. He gives them life, but does not take possession of them. He acts, but does not appropriate. Accomplishes, but claims no credit. It is because he lays claim to no credit that the credit cannot be taken away from him. In chapter 2, there are two important concepts about Tao. One is balance. We see that contradictory things are actually interdependent. This is balance of Tao. The other is Wu Wei. In ancient Chinese, Wu means no, empty, nothingness. Wei indicates to act. Wu Wei actually means to do something at the beginning of nothingness. It follows the Tao. Many people directly say that Wu Wei means no action. In fact, Lao Tzu could not do nothing. Then he would not even have to write the Tao Te Ching. Exalt not the wise, so that the people shall not scheme and contend. Prize not rare objects, so that the people shall not steal. Shut out from sight the things of desire, so that the people's hearts shall not be disturbed. Therefore in the government of the sage, he keeps empty their hearts, makes full their bellies, discourages their ambitions, strengthens their bodies, so that the people may be innocent of knowledge and desires. And the cunning ones shall not presume to interfere. By action without deeds, may all live in peace. From chapter 3, we know. For a person, free from external temptation and desire, can keep the mind and body in balance, is to achieve inner peace. The same is true for a nation, where people are free from external temptations and desires, and there is no needless strife and chaos. The same is true between countries. Without attempts for other countries' land and resources, there would be no war. When Tao works, its power is endless but not easily detected, fathomless like the origin of everything. Its sharp edges rounded off, its tangles untied, its light tempered, its turmoil submerged. Yet dark like deep water it seems to remain. I do not know where it comes. It seems to have appeared before the diagram of the universe. In chapter 4, We need to understand the historical background of Lao Tzu. Before Lao Tzu, when there were no written words, the older ancient Chinese people used Taiji diagram to explain various phenomena. But the interpretation was very arbitrary and free, which could easily cause cognitive confusion. Lao Tzu summarized the various understandings of predecessors on objective laws and wrote Tao Te Ching by words. He also warned people at that time not to be obsessed with diagram, even not to be obsessed with Tao. Tao is endures in the universe. Our understanding of this will help us to understand the content of the Tao Te Ching. Heaven and earth are not showing merciful. They treat all things as sacrificial straw dogs. The sage is not showing merciful. He treats the citizens as sacrificial straw dogs. Sage works according to the Tao of heaven and earth, working like an iron smelting blower. It's silent and empty, yet it gives a supply that never fails. The more it is worked, the more it brings forth. But if the blower make a lot of noise, it will be broken and exhausted. This is core of a blower. Sage also have core of Tao. In this chapter, we first understand the meaning of the sacrificial straw dogs. In ancient China, sacrificial sacrifices to ancestors were carried out with straw to form various animals instead of the actual animals. And straw dogs would be dressed up in a very solemn and beautiful manner. But when it's done, it's burned or thrown away. Heaven and earth treat all things as sacrificial straw dogs. It means heaven and earth create all things and give each life a beautiful process. But eventually it all goes away. Dust to dust, mud to mud. So heaven and earth are not showing merciful to every life, which will only allow them to go with the flow, eventually dying. The sage works silently and does not preach or advertise himself too much. On the contrary, too many decrees make the country restless, like too much noise when the blower are about to break. This can also be interpreted as the sage's wu wei. The spirit of the valley never dies. It is called the mystic womb. The door of the mystic womb opening is the root of heaven and earth, continuously and exist forever, never exhausted in application. In this chapter, Lao Tzu compares the valley in nature to the organ of heaven and earth that generates all things. This metaphor is very vivid. The valley will have rivers, will flood the plains, and is the most active place for all kinds of plants and animals. This is Tao of nature. Continuous reproduction breed in an endless succession. Heaven and earth are everlasting. The reason it can everlasting because it is not living for himself. Therefore the sage puts himself behind others, yet turn him the foremost of the people. He care less for himself, yet he gains respect from others. He does not aim to achieve himself, but what he does makes him achievement. In this chapter, we can know that modesty and comedy are important characteristics of Chinese culture. It is often easier to get along with others if you do not get ahead of others. It's also a smart philosophy of life. The perfect man is like water. Water benefits all things and does not compete with them. It prefers dwells where no one like to stay. Hence it comes near to the Tao. In his dwelling, the sage loves the lowly earth. In his heart, he loves what is profound. In his relations with others, he loves kindness. In his words, he loves sincerity. In government, he loves peace. In business affairs, he loves ability. In his actions, he loves choosing the right time. It is because he does not compete with others that he is without trouble. In this chapter, Lao Tzu uses water to compare Tao. Water is beneficial to all things. It is always doing important things silently, but it does not deliberately show itself. Lao Tzu further explained the meaning of wu-wei to us through the metaphor of water. Wu-wei does not mean to do nothing, but to deal with the core things and not to show themselves. One should stop in due time, rather than fill it to the brim. When a point is whittled too sharp, its sharpness cannot remain long. When gold and jade fill your hall, you will not be able to keep them safe. To be arrogant with wealth and honor, one would bring troubles for oneself. Retire when the goal is achieved. This conforms to Tao. In this chapter, Lao Tzu told us that knowing the way of going forward and choosing stop is important for us surviving in the world. Many people get fame and fortune, but they are arrogant because of it, and that will bring trouble to themselves. You can protect yourself better by knowing when to stop. Body and soul together. But can they avoid separation? In controlling your vital force to achieve gentleness, can you overtake a newborn baby? In reflecting everything you've learned, can you strive after perfection? In loving the people and governing the kingdom, can you do without the trickery? In knowing heaven and earth that generates all things, can you know the function of the female? In comprehending all knowledge, can you hide your whys? Birthing and growing are natural, breeding life, but not for the purpose of exerting influence. Do a lot for it, but not with the aim of taking credit. Give it a place to grow, but not with the intention of dominating it. This is called a noble virtue. In this chapter, there are multiple understandings. For each person, we can reflect on our own shortcomings and keep a humble attitude. For social managers, every life is equal, and blindly imposing their own influence on the people may eventually backfire. "30 spokes unite around the wheel hub. The hub is empty in nothingness. Arises the utility of the wheel. Mold clay into a jar. The jar's hollow is empty in nothingness. Arises the utility of the jar. Cut out doors and windows in the wall. Doors and windows are space of empty and nothingness. Arises the utility of the house. Therefore, we are got profit of being. We are got convenient of nothingness." In this chapter, Lao Tzu uses 3 examples to illustrate the role of nothingness, reminding us not to neglect those inconspicuous things in life, which are actually important parts of life. In these 3 examples, the wheel, the jar, and the house are also the basic needs of survival. In the whole Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu advocates meeting people's basic needs of survival and does not encourage flashy and complicated social relations. It's also interesting to look at it against the whole text. "5 colors will dazzle people. 5 sounds make it hard to hear. 5 flavors dull the taste. Hunting and chasing madden the minds of people. Rare and valuable goods keeps you up at night. Therefore the sage provides for basic needs and not the eye of flashy. Hence, he hold the one and ignore the others. This chapter, Lao Tzu described the role of concentration. On the contrary, if you pursue too much, you will lose your nature. Favor cause someone dismay, like disgrace cause. Gain more riches and honor like a great trouble hidden in the body. Why favor like disgrace cause one dismay? The favor is reward to subordinates. When the favor is obtained, people are thrilled. When the favor is lost, people are dismayed. Gain more riches and honor is a favor to someone. But it is a great trouble hidden in his body if he care the favor very much. The reason why I have a great trouble threaten me is because I have a body that likes favor too much. If I am selfless, even forgotten my body, what trouble can threaten me? To those who can sacrifice themselves for the world, we can trust them with the world. To those who love the people more than themselves, we can handle the ruling power. In this chapter, it is the management philosophy of many Chinese emperor after Lao Tzu. When Chinese President Xi Jinping took office first time, he said, "I will forget myself and live up to the people," is also derived from the Tao Te Ching. There is one thing that always appears in our life. Wanting to see but not seeing. Wanting to hear but not hearing. Wanting to touch but not feeling. Wanting to ask and unable to ask. When we put these somewhat illusory thoughts are mixed together and become one. Above it there is no light. Below it there is no darkness. So vague as to defy any description. It is categorized as the nothingness, and is called the shape without shape as well as the image without substance. It is hence named as vague and dimly visible. Facing it, you cannot see its front. Following it, you cannot see its back. To control the present being by employing the Tao of ancient time, one knows the beginning of the universe. And this is called the discipline of the Tao. In this chapter, Lao Tzu gives us a description of the development of science. We review the development of various sciences in recent times, whether astronomy, relativity, or electromagnetic mechanics, or quantum mechanics, which we're working on right now. There is a transition from ambiguity to clarity. Science is endless. Tao is endless. We need to continue to explore. In history, those who master Tao are extremely knowledgeable with profound expertise. Hence they are hard to describe. Because of this, I can only roughly portray them as follows. Being prudent as if walking across the thin ice of the river. Being alert as if being surrounded with the danger. Being dignified like a guest. Being relaxed as if thawing. Being sincere and natural like uncarved wood. Being open-hearted like valley. Being approachable like the earth. Being broad like ocean. Being active like wind blowing. Can the murkiness be clarified slowly? Can a halt start to move gradually? Those who know Tao would never be complacent. It is because of this they can be refreshing, creative, and innovative. In this chapter, Lao Tzu describes the action of whom understanding Tao. without slightest prejudice and being extremely concentrated. One can handle the complex matters even they happen in parallel. Various things have their roots. When the root is found, we reach the goal. This is the law of the nature. This is natural of Tao. It is wise to know the law of the nature. Without the knowing it and act blindly would doom to fail. Knowing the Tao makes people open-minded. Open-mindedness leads to completeness. Completeness is conformed to the nature. Conforming to nature is Tao. Tao means long-lasting. Therefore, those who know Tao would be always successful. In this chapter, Lao Tzu describes that Tao has always existed in social life. When we study Tao and comprehend Tao, it is easier to understand the society in which we live. The best government is that one in which its citizens are unaware of its existence. The next best rewards the citizens so that they are loyal. A worse one, make the citizens fear. The worst causes them to rebel. Because such rulers lose credibility, therefore people no longer trust them. Take it easy and never abuse the power. This will make rulers more successful and satisfied. In turn, the citizen would praise such rulers who make them at ease. In this chapter, Lao Tzu describes several different ways to manage the country. Lao Tzu thinks Wu Wei is the best way. Let's compare and reflect on the Western democratic management system in today's society. Emphasize competition, let people fight. With capital first, it's easy to lose yourself. The succession of political parties and the incoherence of national policies and decrees are easy to bring trouble to the society. The Western democratic management system is by no means the ideal social management model in Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching. On the decline of Tao, the doctrine of goodness arose. When knowledge and cleverness appeared, great hypocrisy followed in its wake. When relationships and friendships no longer lived at peace, there was praise of the moral code of the family. When a country fell into chaos and misrule, there was praise of country's loyal ministers. In this chapter, Lao Tzu argues in reverse that the operation of society should be spontaneous, and that excessive emphasis on rules and the legal system and advocacy of benevolence, justice, and morality. The state is not well managed in fact. Discard cleverness and wisdom, and the people will benefit themselves 100-fold. Discard benevolence and rectitude, and the people will again become filial and loyal. Discard ingenuity and profit, and theft will no longer exist. As these three touch the externals and are inadequate, the people have need of what they can depend upon. Embrace their original nature. Discard selfishness and weaken desires. Discard cultural knowledge and worries will disappear. This chapter, in conjunction with the content of chapter 18, removes complex and trivial thoughts and returns to simplicity. The same goes for governing the country and getting along with people. Studying thoroughly makes people free of worries. Is there a difference between praise and flattery? Is there a difference between goodness and evil? That which men fear is indeed to be feared, because the universe is infinite. People are cheerful, as if at banquets, and as if sights seen from a tower in spring. I show no emotion, like an infant, and as if wandering aimlessly. People have plenty, but I am alone as if I have lost everything. I am looking be foolish and stupid. Ordinary crowds look smart, while I appear naive. Ordinary crowds look sharp, while I appear dull. People look deft, while I appear awkward. I am different from the crowd. This is because I follow Tao. In this chapter, every life has its own unique aspect. For those who practice the Tao, he may be more different from ordinary people. However, if he can see the world more clearly through the knowing of the Tao, he can still survive well in the world. He will find his own way in the world. The forms of the great virtue exclusively depend on the Tao. The Tao as a thing is vague and indefinite. Vague and indefinite. It presents images. Indefinite and vague. It embodies substance. Distant and dark. It embraces semen-like essence. The essence is a genuine existence that can be tested as true. From ancient times to now, its name has always been accepted, and with which the beginning of all things can be surveyed. How do I know the initial state of all things? By means of the Tao. In this chapter, Lao Tzu explains that Tao is one kind of science. If we understand the secret of Tao, we can deduce the changes of the world through past experience and objective laws. To yield is to be preserved whole. To be bent is to become straight. To be hollow is to be filled. To be tattered is to be renewed. To be in want is to possess. To have plenty is to be confused. Therefore the sage embraces the One and becomes the model of the world. He does not reveal himself and is therefore luminous. He does not justify himself and is therefore far-famed. He does not boast of himself and therefore people give him credit. One does not contend with others, so nobody in the world can win him in contention. The ancient saying to yield is to be preserved whole is surely not an empty saying, which can be really proved effective. In this chapter, Lao Tzu's original meaning is to tell future generations that the accumulation of wu-wei is bound to make great achievements. Lao Tzu described that the changes of things are complementary. The world is not static, even interdependent. Curved and straight are not absolute, which even coincides with the concept of calculus in our modern mathematics. Nature says few words. Hence it is that a squall lasts not a whole morning. A rainstorm continues not a whole day. Where do they come from? From nature. Even nature does not last long. How much less should human beings? Who makes the wind and rain? It is the nature. If the nature cannot have long-lasting stamina, how can people? He who conforms to the Tao is readily received by the Tao. He who conforms to the Te is readily received by the Te. He who conforms to the principle of losing both above is readily discarded by the principle of loss. The lack of faith on the part of the ruler leads to the lack of confidence in him on the part of the people. In this chapter, nothing in the world lasts forever. So why waste time on people and things that are different from your Tao? Why waste time on something that is not worth doing. People are grouped by their kind, and so is Tao. He who stands on tiptoes cannot stand well. He who walks with great strides cannot walk well. He who shows off himself cannot become conspicuous. He who regards himself infallible cannot become illustrious. He who brags about himself cannot gain achievement. He who boasts of himself cannot become a leader. From the point of view of the Tao, these behaviors are like eating too much and getting a lot of flap. So disgusting that a man of Tao never behaves like that. In this chapter, Lao Tzu tells us that being down to earth and not overestimating ourselves is the basis of how we behave. There is a thing integrated, formed, and born earlier than heaven and earth, silent and empty. It relies on nothing, moving around forever. We may regard it as the mother of all things. I do not know its name, so I name it as the Tao, and further name it as the Great. The Great is moving forward without stopping, extending to the remotest distance, and then returning to where it was. That is why I say, the Tao is great. Heaven is great. Earth is great. And man is also great. There are 4 things that are great. Of them, man is one. Man takes earth as his model. Earth takes heaven as its model. Heaven takes the Tao as its model. The Tao takes what is natural as its model. In this chapter, echoing chapter 4, Lao Tzu further concludes that Tao is the law of the formation and change of the universe. The solid is the root of the light. The quiescent is the master of the hasty. That is why the sage is always accompanied by his heavily laden cart when he travels all day long. Though he has a luxurious life to enjoy, he never indulges himself in it. Why should a ruler of 10,000 chariots take reckless action to govern the empire? Lightness leads to the loss of the root. Restlessness leads to the loss of the Lord. In this chapter, there is a fundamental law to follow in the conduct of people and the management of the country. That is, to keep the root of things. A good runner leaves no track. A good speech leaves no flaws for attack. A good accountant makes use of no counters. He who is good at shutting renders all efforts of opening in vain though he uses no bolts. He who is good at tying renders all efforts of untying in vain though he uses no ropes. That is why the sage is always good at saving people and abandoning no one. That is why the sage is always good at saving things and abandoning nothing. This is called the intrinsic wisdom. Therefore, the well-known man is the teacher of less known, and the less known man is the student of the well-known. He who not values his teacher, he who not loves his student, he lost himself though he seems clever. Such is the subtle secret of Tao. In this chapter, Lao Tzu tells us that the world has many mysteries, which need to be passed on from generation to generation, so that civilization and culture can continue. Students respect teachers. Teachers love students. Learning knowledge. Knowledge inheritance. social civilization can be inherited. Though knowing what is masculine, you are ready to play the role of female, and content to be a stream in the world. Content to be a stream in the world. You will be accompanied by the eternal virtue, in return to being a baby. Though knowing what is white, you are ready to play the role of black, and content to be a model of the world. Content to be a model of the world. You will be no longer at odds with the eternal virtue, and return to the final truth. Though knowing what is honor, you are ready to play the role of the disgraced, and content to be a valley in the world. Content to be a valley in the world. You will no longer lack the eternal virtue, and return to simplicity of Tao. When simplicity gets shattered and becomes materialized, the sage makes use of it to be the lord over other officials. One should know, the greatest system is not separable. In this chapter, Lao Tzu describes the basic strategies for managing the country. It means that a person can use his talents to their fullest. And the assessment of personnel need to have the most basic concept of honor and disgrace. There are those who will rule the kingdom. He actually had to do a lot of things that he didn't want to do in his heart. The kingship is so sacred that cannot be obtained through force. Those who try to obtain it by force will ruin it. Those who keep it by force will lose it. Because things are different. Some go ahead or follow. Some breathe gently or hard. Some are strong or weak. Some are in safety or in danger. Hence the sage does away with extremity, extravagance, and excess. In this chapter, Lao Tzu described that it is not easy to manage the country, and there are many things that are restricted. Moreover, it is necessary to understand the nature of Tao health cultivation and strict requirements on oneself. Those who aid the ruler with Tao do not use military power to win the world. This is because such action is likely to backfire. Where armies camp, thorny problems arise. Where troops march, fatal years follow. The competent general stops when the goal is reached and never flaunts. Never be vainglorious when the goal is achieved. Never be haughty when the goal is achieved. Never be arrogant when the goal is achieved. Never do more than necessary when the goal is achieved. Never flaunt when the goal is achieved. It is not following Tao if things wilt while still in their prime. Not following Tao results in an untimely end. This chapter, showing that Lao Tzu was a pacifist, exhorted the leaders of the state to use troops carefully, not to easily start a war. Don't bully the strong over the weak. Of all things, soldiers are instruments of evil, hated by men. Therefore, Tao followers avoid them. At home, gentlemen are happy in left seats. When in war, gentlemen prefer to the right. Since weapons are destructive, they are not gentlemen's tools. They are used as a last resort. It is better to be cautious. After winning, one should not glorify the victory. By glorifying war, one takes delight in killing. Those who take delight in killing will not win the world. In joyful events, the left is honored. In funerals, the right side is honored. The lieutenant commander positions to the left. The command-in-chief positions to the right. That is to say, it is celebrated as a funeral rite. The slaying of multitudes should be mourned with sorrow. A victory of war should be celebrated with the funeral rite. In this chapter, as in chapter 30, Lao Tzu opposes the militarism and argues that only by not showing force can national leaders win over the people. Tao does not have a name and is unadorned. It is unadorned, but no one can rule it. If kings and nobles can follow Tao, the people themselves would be submissive. When heaven and earth work together, rain is produced. Nobody gives the order, it is produced naturally. When a regulation is initiated, it should have a reason. When there is a reason, we need to know where to stop. If we know where to stop, we may avoid failure. Tao to the world is like the sea to the rivers. In this chapter, where the previous two chapters discussed force and war, Lao Tzu further explained the benefits of obeying Tao, governing by Tao, for the benefit of the country and the people. Knowing others is smart. Knowing oneself is clear-headed. Winning others is forceful. Winning oneself is powerful. Content people are rich. Diligent people are of high purpose. He who does not lose his core endures. Those who die without being forgotten are perpetual. In this chapter, Lao Tzu explains that self-awareness and self-restraint is an important way to comprehend Tao. The great Tao is felt everywhere, extending in all directions. All things grow on it and it never declines them. It accomplishes its great task without claiming to merit. It breeds all things without claiming to be their master. It can be called the small, being the home of all things, yet claiming not. It may be considered great, because to the end it does not claim greatness. Its greatness is achieved. In this chapter, Lao Tzu goes on to describe the action of Tao. In particular, he explains the meaning of small and great in the Tao Te Ching. Small means convergence, not arrogant, not credit. Understanding the meaning of small here is also helpful to our understanding of small states in chapter 80. He who holding the diagram of the universe, and all the world follows without needing harm, and lives in health, peace, commonwealth. Offer good things to eat, and the wayfarer stays. But Tao is mild to the taste. Looked at, it cannot be seen. Listened to, it cannot be heard. Applied, its supply never fails. In this chapter, Lao Tzu describes Tao and it looks very ordinary. But if we take it into our hearts, we can see how powerful Tao is. If you want a thing to dwindle, you should arrogant it first. If you want a thing weakened, you should strengthen it first. If you want a thing gotten rid of, you should promote it first. If you want a thing taken away, you should give to it first. These are called subtle wisdom. The supple and weak overcomes the rigid and strong. Fish should not be allowed to leave the deep water, and sharp weapons of the state should not be shown to the public. In this chapter, Lao Tzu describes Tao's tactics and use. such as showing weakness and being struck behind, seemingly failing to seize the first opportunity, but actually seizing it. Tao normally shows no action, yet it plays a role everywhere. If the kings and nobles can follow the Tao, all people will follow the Tao from their self-awareness. And if anyone loses himself because of self-awareness, I will guide him with simple and unadorned. He guided by simple and unadorned. He will not have distracting desires. Quietness with no distracting desires. And the world arrives at peace of its own accord. In this chapter, Lao Tzu summarized the previous chapters and concluded Wu-wei, no action, can affect everything. How do we make Wu-wei? When Lao Tzu mentioned Wu-wei, then we should know that Wu-wei is not mean of doing nothing. Otherwise Lao Tzu would not mention it. It's knowing how to discipline yourself. Like returning to simplicity. Not pursuing too many desires. Knowing that there is something you don't need to do. A man of the great virtue, Te, does not claim to be a virtue. Thus he is of the true virtue. A man of the small virtue always holds fast to the virtue in form. Thus he is actually of no virtue. A man of the great virtue remains inactive, without deliberately manifesting his virtue. A man of the small benevolence keeps being active, always deliberately manifesting his virtue. A man of the great benevolence acts but never deliberately shows his benevolence. A man of great justice acts and also deliberately shows his justice. A man of rigid rights acts and even rolls up his sleeves to force people to conform to rights when no one responds to him. Therefore, virtue comes after missing of Tao. Benevolence comes after missing of virtue. Justice comes after missing of benevolence. Rights come after missing of justice. Thus rights result from the lack of loyalty and good faith, and function as the beginning of the great disorder. Foresight is only the flowery embellishment of the Tao, as well as the beginning of ignorance. Hence the true man sets store by the thick rather than by the thin, and values the fruit rather than the flower. That is why he takes the former and discards the latter. From this chapter, if the whole Tao Te Ching is divided into two parts, then the first 37 chapters will focus on the Tao. And from this chapter, on the Te, virtue, part. Tao is the foundation of Te, virtue. Understanding Tao is a prerequisite for possessing Te, virtue. Those who are virtuous often show Tao's practice. Tao before the ancient holds the origin. Heaven that holds the origin becomes clear and bright. Earth that holds the origin becomes steady. Gods that hold the origin become efficacious. Valleys that hold the origin become full. All creatures that hold the origin become alive. Lords and leaders who hold the origin become leaders of the human world. By inference, heaven might split without what makes it clear and bright, earth might shake without what makes it steady. Gods might disappear without what makes them efficacious. Valleys might go dry without what makes them full. All creatures might die out without what makes them alive. Lords and kings might fall without what makes them leaders. That is why the humble is the root of the noble, and the high is based on the low. That is why lords and kings call themselves the solitary, the few and the no harvest. Does not this take the humble as the root of the noble? Does this not? Hence the highest honor does not need honoring. It is better, therefore, to be a hard stone than a beautiful piece of jade. In this chapter, Lao Tzu explained why the ancient Chinese emperors used to call themselves the solitary, the few, or the no harvest. In fact, the emperor knew he humble as the root of the noble, and his power was based on every common people, and the country should serve for the people. So China's current leaders often say, the country belongs to the people, and the people are the master of the country. This is the virtue of a leader. Reversion is the action of Tao. Gentleness is the function of Tao. The things of this world come from being, and being comes from nothingness. This chapter has the fewest words of all the chapters, but it is considered to be the essence of the whole Tao Te Ching. It is a more specific explanation of Wu Wei, an explanation of objective laws, which can bring learners very profound thought. When hearing Tao, the intelligent people practice it diligently. The average people practice it casually. Ignorant people laugh at it. If it were not laughed by ignorant people, it would not be Tao. That is why the ancients say, who understands Tao seems dull of comprehension. Who is advanced in Tao seems to slip backwards. Who moves on the even path seems to go up and down. Superior character appears like a valley. Sheer white appears like tarnished. Great character appears like invisible. Pure worth appears like contaminated. Great space like boundless. Great talent takes long to mature. Great sounds like voiceless. Great form has no contour. Tao is invisible and nameless. It is only Tao that can lend help and make endeavors successful. In this chapter, the different states of Tao followers are described, as well as the manifestations of the monastics. Lao Tzu deduced that the ultimate state of Tao is boundless, invisible, voiceless, and nameless, and even the opposite of it. That is, in the previous chapter, reversion is the action of Tao. We see from the opposite side, boundless, invisible, voiceless, and nameless. Isn't it a kind of Wu Wei that Laozi has always said? Out of Tao, one is born. Out of one, two is born. Out of two, three is born. Out of three, the created universe. The created universe carries the yin at its back, and the yang in front. Through the union of the pervading principles it reaches harmony. To be the solitary, the few, and the no harvest is what men hate most. Yet the lords and kings call themselves by such names. Things can benefit from damages. Things can also be damaged from benefits. Therefore, I can teach what the other taught me. The larger beams lead to the collapse, and insolent people tend to die early. This I shall regard as my spiritual teacher. In this chapter, Lao Tzu describes that all things grow in their own order and changing rules, and must start from basement work. Tao starts in nothingness, and then gradually produce 1, 2, and 3. Doing basic work well is very important, but often not easy to be seen from the outside. When building a house, if you do not consider the bearing capacity of the foundation and pillars, blindly pursue the scenery of the surface, and use larger beams, will lead to the collapse of the house. Therefore, strong columns and weak beams are the prevailing requirements of architecture. the most supple in the world, can go through the hardest in the world. What consists of nothingness can enter what has no crevices. I thus know the benefit of Wu-Wei. Teaching without words. The benefit of Wu-Wei are what few people in the world can perform and obtain. In this chapter, Lao Tzu sums up the benefits of Wu-Wei, namely the virtues of Wu-Wei. Which is precious? Your name or your body? Which is more important? Your body or your goods? Which is more harmful? Gain or loss? Therefore, he who loves most spends most. He who hoards much loses much. The contented man meets no disgrace. Who knows when to stop runs into no danger. He can long endure. In this chapter, Lao Tzu wrote about the self-discipline and self-awakening. Too much pursuit of fame and wealth, and often lead to suffering from it. No self-satisfaction and restraint is the virtue of self-discipline and self-awakening. Great achievement appears imperfect. Its application is limitless. Complete fullness appears empty. It cannot be used up. Perfect straightness appears bent. Adept skills appear awkward. Great eloquence appears dull. Movement overcomes cold, but keeping still overcomes heat. Who is calm and quiet becomes the guide for the universe. In this chapter, Lao Tzu once again describes the state of the monasticism, the manifestation of which does not exist in a warm and perfect manner, but even the opposite of what we expect. When we remain calm and peaceful, it is easier to explore the root of the world. When the Tao prevails in the world, the battle steeds are returned to farmers for tilling the fields. When the Tao does not prevail in the world, even pregnant maras are taken over for wars. There is no greater curse than the lack of contentment, no greater sin than the desire for possession. Therefore, he who is contented with contentment shall be always content. This chapter, content is the virtue of man, is also the virtue of the country. Without stepping outside doors, one can know what is happening in the world. Without looking out of windows, one can see the Tao of heaven. The farther one pursues knowledge, the less one knows. Therefore the sage knows without running so far, understands without seeing, accomplishes without doing. In this chapter, the world is vast and there is no end to exploration. If you understand the Tao, you can find the essential law, and there is no need to do futile things. Studying knowledge. One can be of benefit from day to day. Following Tao, one uses less force day after day. Less and less. One uses no force. He who conquers the world often does so by no force. When one is compelled to do something, the world is already beyond his conquering. In this chapter, the more knowledge you learn, the less futile things you will do, and indulging in useless things It is difficult to get things done. The sage has no decided opinions and feelings, but regards the people's opinions and feelings as his own. The good ones I declare good. The bad ones I also declare good. That is the goodness of virtue. The honest ones I believe. The liars I also believe. That is the faith of virtue. The sage dwells in the world peacefully, harmoniously. The people of the world are brought into a community of heart, and the sage regards them all as his own children. In this chapter, Lao Tzu described the virtue of tolerance to others as sage. Good and bad, belief and unbelief. Sage can be tolerant. Tolerance is the vastness of Tao and will bring peace to the world. In the life and death cycle, 3 in 10 enjoy natural longevity. 3 in 10 die normally. There are some, 3 in 10, who die unnaturally. Why in such cases? Because they are too eager to live longer. It is well known that those who are good at protect themselves, not meeting with the rhinoceros or tiger when traveling on land, nor is he wounded in war. For the rhinoceros has no use for its horns, and the tiger has no use for its claws. The weapons have no use for their blades. What is the reason? They never put themselves into a fatal situation. In this chapter, human life, long or short. In life, you will encounter various threats, more or less, explicit or implicit. Don't misbehave. Keep the right path. It is easier to avoid bad luck. Tao gives them birth. Te, virtue, fosters them. The material world gives them form. The circumstances of the moment complete them. Therefore all things of the universe worship Tao and exalt Te. Tao is worshipped and Te is exalted, without anyone's order but is so of its own accord. Therefore Tao gives them birth. Te fosters them, makes them grow, develops them, gives them a harbor, a place to dwell in peace. Breeding life, but not for the purpose of exerting influence. Do a lot for it, but not with the aim of taking credit. Give it a place to grow, but not with the intention of dominating it. This is called a noble Te, virtue. In this chapter, echoing chapter 10, Tao is the foundation of Te, virtue. When you understand Tao, learn Tao and practice Tao, Te, virtue, will come into being naturally. There was a beginning of the heaven and earth, which may be regarded as the mother of the heaven and earth. We may know all things from their mother. We may know the mother from her sons. Then we can avoid a lot of unpredictable things in our life. Plugging leakages. Closing openings. We can never be depleted. Opening leakages. Making too many commitments, and one's whole life is beyond redemption. Those who pay attention to details are wise. Those who exercise flexibility are strong. Use the light of Tao. Things are illuminated. Thus we can avoid mistakes. This is called normal behavior. In this chapter, Lao Tzu tells us that our space for cognition and existence is limited. Every person, every organization, and even every country should know self-restraint. It is the basis of every life we live. If I were possessed of austere knowledge, walking on the main path, I would avoid the bypaths. The main path is easy to walk on. Yet people love the bypaths. While the government house is spick and span, the fields full of weeds, and the warehouses nearly empty, dressing extravagantly, carrying sharp swords, wasting food, excessively collecting money or properties. This is to lead the world toward brigandage. These do not conform to Tao. In this chapter, Lao Tzu tells us that if we want to go fast, we may not reach it. Ambitious, the pursuit of the surface of the scenery, for themselves, for others, there is no benefit. What is established cannot be uprooted. What is well held cannot slip. Likewise, descendants will continue to perform traditional rituals. Cultivating oneself, Te is genuine. Cultivating the family, Te is plentiful. Cultivating the village, Te is long-lasting. Cultivating the country, Te is prevailing. Cultivating the world, Te is ubiquitous. Therefore, observe all individuals through one individual. Observe the whole families through one of the family. Observe the whole villages through one of the village. Observe the whole country through one of the country. Observe all worlds through one of the world. How do I know the world is so? By using the above observations. In this chapter, Lao Tzu illustrates that learning Tao is not negative, but has a positive impact on the surrounding people and society. A man of prodigious virtue is just like a newly born baby. Poisonous insects will not sting it. Beasts of prey will not harm it. Birds of prey will not swoop down upon it. Its bones and muscles are weak and supple, yet its hold is tight. It does not know sexual intercourse between the male and female, yet its little penis often erects itself. This is because it is at the height of virility. It cries all day long, yet its throat does not become hoarse. This is because it is at the height of harmonious vim and vigor. To know harmony is to know the law of unity. To know the law of unity is to know discernment. To indulge in sensual pleasures is to look for disasters. To let virility driven by desires is to give free rein to strength. A creature in its prime is at the turning point of being old, for it is against the Tao. What is against the Tao comes to an early end. In this chapter, in Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, the newborn baby is the second object close to Tao, the first being water. In fact, Tao exists in human nature and requires self-awakening. Knowledgeable people rarely show off. Boastful people are not truly knowledgeable. Plugging leakages, closing openings, smooth out sharp edges, resolve conflicts, harmonize glares, and blend into the base. These are profound harmony. Do not become intimate when receiving the desired. Do not become alienating when receiving the undesired. Do not become greedy when obtaining profit. Do not retaliate when receiving hostility. Do not prize when obtaining the precious. Do not debase when receiving humility. Doing so can gain respect from others. In this chapter, the peaceful world is harmony. A world without strife is harmony. In the management of the country, the people are not related to their interests. This is a very good state of governance. Govern the country by the normal way. Fight the battle by the unexpected way. And one can win the world without using force. How do I know this is so? By the following. When there are too many restrictions and regulations, people become poor. When there are too many weapons, the country is in disarray. When there are too many tricks, bizarre things happen. When there are too many decrees, the crime rate increases. This is why the sage says, I do not force my way, and people live peacefully. I keep quiet, and people live normally. I do not interfere, and people become rich. I do not covet anything, and people would be honest. In this chapter, Lao Tzu describes the society he expects. The system is stable. The society is stable. Everything is in order. If the ruler of the country is in chaos, the common people will not be peaceful, resulting in all kinds of chaos. Countries and people, people and people, do not interfere with each other. When the governor is magnanimous, the people will become simple. When the governor is harsh, the people will become cunning. Disaster hides itself behind good fortune. Good fortune leans against disaster. Who knows the secret? There is no definite answer. The normal changes into the abnormal. The good changes into the evil. People have been long perplexed. Thus the sage is square and upright, but does not wound the people. He is edged but does not cut the people. He is candid but does not behave wantonly. He gives light but does not dazzle. In this chapter, Lao Tzu described, too much of a good thing is not good. The world is changing endlessly. Not arrogant, no convergence, is the management of the country and dealing with human relationships. In managing human affairs, there is no better rule than to be sparing. To be sparing is to forestall. To forestall is to be prepared and strengthened. To be prepared and strengthened is to be ever victorious. To be ever victorious is to have infinite capacity. He who has infinite capacity is fit to rule a country. And the principle of a ruling country can long endure. This is to be firmly rooted, to have deep strength. The road to immortality and enduring vision. This chapter, how to prepare in advance. Only know the route, can grasp the key, be prepared, get the first chance. Governing a big country is like cooking small fish. Sage govern the country with Tao. The hidden dangers that endanger the country and its people have no chance to manifest themselves. It is not that the hidden danger is harmless and completely eliminated, but because it has no chance to harm the country and its people. Therefore, sage does no harm to the people. Sage and the people do no harm for each other. They enjoy the benefit of Te, virtue. In this chapter, The process of cooking small fish is not like the process of handling big fish to scale and pick gills. Afraid of being pricked by fish bones. There is no need to turn back and forth after the pot. Afraid to destroy the fish. By using this idea to get along with the people and not interfering too much in their lives, the people in charge of the country benefit from each other instead of harming each other. A large country should play the role of female. Just like the lowest reaches of a river, where all the other streams meet, the female always conquers the male by motionlessness. Because the motionless female always takes the lower position. Hence the large country can annex the small one by taking the lower position. The small country can gain the trust of the large one by taking the lower position. The case being either the former or vice versa. The large country wants to put the small one under its protection. The small country wants to be shielded by the large one. Thus both can satisfy their wishes. But the large country should be more willing to take the lower position. In this chapter, Lao Tzu describes the relationship between countries. If a big country forcibly annexes a small country, it will bring financial burden and management difficulties to the state, and even shake the foundation of the rule. If a small country blindly obeys a big country and loses its independent status, it will easily become a pawn of a big country and bring disaster to the country. Countries also have their own balance. There are long-term policies to protect the country from the pain of unrest. Tao is the mysterious secret of the universe. The well-known man's treasure. An unwell-known man's refuge. Good words can win reverence. Good behavior can win admiration. For people who are unwell-known, should they be abandoned? Therefore, for the emperor who is enthroned and the 3 senior administrators who are appointed, there may be priceless jades and fast carriages. None is as good as adopting Tao. Why Tao is so treasured by generations? Is it not because it helps us reach our goals and avoid mistakes? Therefore it is treasured by the whole world. In this chapter, Lao Tzu described, under the world, there are all living beings in all phases. There are people who master knowledge. There are people who do not master knowledge. There are good people, there are also bad people. There are those who like Tao, and there are those who reject Tao. Only by seeking common ground while reserving differences can society be harmonious. Act by means of wu wei. Deal with matters by means of not being meddlesome. Taste by means of tastelessness. The big stems from the small. The many is based on the few. To overcome the difficult should begin with the easy. To accomplish what is big should begin with the small. The difficult things in the world must originate in the easy. The big things in the world must take root in the small. That is why the sage can accomplish what is great by never attempting to be great. Light promise giving, light promise breaking. The easier one considers things, the more difficult things become. That is why the sage never meets with difficulty, because he always considers things difficult. In this chapter, Lao Tzu corrects the wrong understanding of Tao. That is, wu wei is not something to be done hastily and easily. Behind wu wei, a lot of knowledge needs to be accumulated, and a lot of detailed things need to be done. When things are stable, it is easy to hold. When problems have not occurred, they are easy to cope with. When things are brittle, they break easily. When things are tiny, they dissolve easily. Prepare for problems before they appear. Put things in order before they become chaotic. Giant trees grow from tiny seeds. High-rise buildings start from the first mound of earth. Long journeys begin with a first step. People often fail when the tasks are close to complete. If they keep working as diligently as the beginning, then they would not fail. Sages want things others do not want. They do not treasure rare goods. They study things others ignore. They remind themselves of others' mistakes. They let everything develops naturally and do not dare to force it. In this chapter, Lao Tzu expounded the basic rules of pursuing Tao and learning knowledge, and started from the foundation with his feet on the ground. So step by step, let nature take its course, master the key. Get rid of unrealistic thoughts. This is the general way we understand how things change. Those ancient men of the profound Tao did not use the Tao to rule the people with cleverness, but rule them with simple and honest. The people are hard to rule because they are too clever. Thus, to govern a country by cleverness is bound to ruin the country. Not to govern the state by cleverness is a blessing to the country. These are two models of government. Keeping the knowledge of these two models is known as the mysterious virtue. The mysterious virtue is profound and far-reaching, running counter to concrete things. At their extremes, there is the most complete conformity to nature. In this chapter, Lao Tzu believes that if the manager uses tricks against the people will naturally try their best to deal with the manager, which will lead to the chaos of the country. Many people think that Lao Tzu's ideas make people stupid so that they can manage. But throughout the whole article, Lao Tzu is actually advocating a simple and honest way to manage the country. The country and the people trust each other is a harmonious society. How did the great rivers and seas become the lords of the ravines? By being good at keeping low. That was how they became lords of the ravines. Therefore, in order to be the chief among the people, one must speak like their inferiors. In order to be foremost among the people, one must walk behind them. Thus it is that the sage stays above, and the people do not feel his weight. Walks in front, and the people do not wish him harm. Then the people of the world are glad to uphold him forever, because he does not contend. No one in the world can contend against him. In this chapter, humility is the virtue of being a man. Don't get in front of others. Don't force others. This is the virtue of doing things. People who achieve great things often have this quality. People in the world say to me that Tao is great, but it resembles nothing. It is because of the greatness that nothing is like it. If it were similar to anything, it would have turned trivial long ago. I have 3 great treasures. Hold and maintain them. The first is kindness. The second is frugality. The third is the non-contention. Being kind, one can have courage. Being frugal, one can grow wide. Non-contention, one can become the leader. If one is courageous without kindness, expanding without frugality, and prestigious without modesty, he is doomed to fail. With kindness, one would win in war and be secure in defense. When heaven come to rescue, it guards by using kindness. In this chapter, Lao Tzu is well aware that his views are very different from the mainstream cognition of society. In fact, science has been like this for generations. It takes time for society to accept it. Therefore, Lao Tzu also told those who study Tao that kindness, frugality, and non-contention are the 3 virtues to secure one's life. He who is good at being a commander does not display his bravery. He who is good at fighting does not burst into anger. He who is good at defeating his enemy does not brace himself to engage in a tough battle. He who is good at employing men humbles himself before them. This is called the virtue of non-contention. This is the use of people's abilities. This is called the best conformation to nature and history. In this chapter, Lao Tzu describes the role of Tao. It will greatly improve the ability of individual cultivation and national governance. There is the maxim of military strategists: I dare not be the first to invade, but rather be the invaded. Dare not press forward an inch, but rather retreat a foot. That is, to march without formations, to roll up the sleeves, to charge not in frontal attacks, to arm without weapons. There is no greater catastrophe than to underestimate the enemy. To underestimate the enemy might entail the loss of my treasures. Therefore, when 2 equally matched armies meet, it is the man of sorrow who wins. In this chapter, Lao Tzu describes that Tao plays a great role in the military field as well. Tao considers the situation, does not underestimate the enemy, knows how to advance and retreat, and uses retreat to advance. My words are very easy to understand and very easy to put into practice. Yet there should have been no one in the world who can understand them or can put them into practice. Words must be purpose-oriented. Deeds must be reasonably grounded. People cannot understand me because they fail to understand what is said above. Those who understand me are few. Those who can follow my advice are even less. That is why the sage is always dressed in coarse cloth, but conceals about him a beautiful piece of jade. In this chapter, Lao Tzu tells us that all the principles in the Tao Te Ching are simple and easy to understand. There's no need to be pretentious and conspicuous. Who knows that he does not know is the highest. Who pretends to know what he does not know is sick-minded. And who recognizes sick-mindedness as sick-mindedness is not sick-minded. The sage is of no shortcoming, because he considers shortcoming as shortcoming. He considers shortcoming as shortcoming. Thus he has no shortcoming. In this chapter, Lao Tzu awakens us again, the awakening of ourselves. He who knows himself will win. When the people are not afraid of the threatening might of the authority, the great tumult will soon ensue. Do not harass their living places. Do not deprive them of their means of livelihood. If you do not oppress the people will not be tired of the ruler. Hence the sage knows himself but does not praise himself, loves himself but does not honor himself. That is why he discards the latter and takes the former. In this chapter, Lao Tzu describes the importance of the people. The people are the masters of the country. The ruler does not oppress the people. The society can be harmonious. At the same time, Lao Tzu also began to warn the governor. Blindly squeeze the people, resulting in displacement, will inevitably suffer the people's resistance. Bravery in being bold leads to death. Bravery in being retreat leads to surviving. These two kinds of bravery. There is some advantage and some disadvantage. Who knows why? Heaven hates what it hates. Even the sage feels it difficult to understand. This is the Tao of heaven. To excel in triumphing by means of non-contention. To be good at answering by means of taciturnity. To attract people by using no summons. To be quick in planning by acting slowly. Heaven's net is wide. Although it has meshes, nothing escapes from it. In this chapter, people like to talk about the risk is proportional to the return. The actual and risk is proportional to the loss is the same meaning. Risk takers should have the corresponding bottom line and abide by the limits of legal ethics. Otherwise they may bring disadvantage to themselves. The people are not afraid of death. Why threaten them with death? Supposing that the people are afraid of death, and we can seize and kill the unruly, who would dare to do so? It is normal to have executioners who kill. Substituting an executioner in killing is like substituting a master lumberjack in chopping trees. Chopping trees by non-professionals rarely results in no hand injuries. In this chapter, Lao Tzu warned that the authorities should not kill innocents and use violence to govern the country. Killing too much will make the people not afraid to kill and lead to the collapse of the regime. The hunger on the part of the people is the result of exorbitant taxes on the part of the ruler. Thus the people are hungry. The unruliness on the part of the people is the result of meddlesome actions on the part of the ruler. Thus the people are unruly. Making light of life on the part of the people is the result of setting too much store by life on the part of the ruler. Thus the people make light of life. Those who make light of their own life are wiser than those who overvalue their life. In this chapter, Lao Tzu described that the rulers of the state, in order to pursue their own reputation and status, would squeeze in exorbitant taxes from the common people, which led to the people's livelihood and the collapse of the state. While alive, a man's body is supple. When dead, it becomes hard. While alive, grass and trees are supple. When dead, they become dry and stiff. Therefore hardness and stiffness are the companions of death, and softness and gentleness are the companions of life. Therefore when an army is headstrong, it will lose in a battle. When a tree is hard, it will be cut down. The big and rigid would be overtaken by the nimble and flexible. In this chapter, the stronger the outside, the weaker the inside. A country's military development, oppression of the people at home and continuous war abroad, beyond the endurance of the national strength, will inevitably lead to the internal fragility and collapse of the country. Does not the Tao of Heaven resemble the bending of a bow? Pressing down the high, lifting up the low, reducing the excessive, compensating the deficient? So the Tao of Heaven means to compensate the deficient by reducing the excess. The Tao of man is different. It gives to one who already has more than enough by taking from one who is in want. Who can offer what he has in excess to the people? Only the man of Tao. Thus the sage benefits all things without claiming to be their benefactor, succeeds without claiming credit, because he does not want to show off his wisdom. This chapter, how to understand the mean of compensate the deficient by reducing the excess, is Tao of Heaven. Thus, better refinement than pursuing too much. Better not to ask than to ask forcefully. Better to stand in the back than in the front. Better restrain yourself than flaunt yourself. You stand under people, you understand Wu Wei. Nothing in the world is more supple than water. Yet nothing is more powerful than water in attacking the hard and strong. Why? Because nothing can take its place. Everyone in the world knows that the weak is more powerful than the strong, that the supple is more rigid than the hard. Yet no one so far can put the knowledge into practice. That is why the sage says, only he who can bear the humiliation on behalf of the state can be called the great priest of the state. Only he who dares shoulder the responsibility for the calamity of the state can be called the king of the state. These logical words appear to be controversial. In this chapter, Lao Tzu describes the performance of a virtuous manager. Serve the country for the people. Love the country and the people. Serve the country with the body. And give priority to the interests of the people, instead of oppressing the people. When the great enmity is allayed, there must be some remaining hostility. Even if one requites hostility with kindness, how can that be considered perfect? Therefore the sage keeps the stub of the receipt for a loan, but never presses for payment from people. A man of virtue is as tolerant as the sage who keeps the stub of the receipt. A man of no virtue is as harsh as tax collectors. The Tao of Heaven never shows favoritism. It always helps those who are good. In this chapter, virtuous managers know tolerance and self-discipline, so as to make the country peaceful. Tao will choose such virtuous people. Country who know moderation. People who know self-discipline. Make people fear death so that they refuse to venture far away. Although there are vehicles and boats, nobody uses them. Although there are troops and weapons, they are not deployed. Let people once again use not time to keep records. Let people enjoy their food, beautify their clothes, live peacefully, and be happy with their traditions. Although neighboring kingdoms are within sight, and dog barks and rooster crows can be heard over the border. But people never interfere with each other in their lifetime. In this chapter, Lao Tzu concludes that both the country and the people know self-discipline and moderation, which will naturally present a picture of harmony and happiness. Credible words are not sweet. Sweet words are not credible. Honest people do not need to argue for themselves. Those who argue for themselves are not honest. Experts have deep knowledge about their specialties. Those who try to learn everything would know little about each. Sages never accumulate wealth. They believe the more they give up, the more they have. And the more they give away, the more they accumulate. Tao of the nature is this: benefiting without harming. Tao of people is this: achieving with wu wei. In this chapter, Lao Tzu made a summary of the whole article. The simpler Tao is, the more useful it is. Let's go with the flow. Life is like this. So is the management of the country. The same is true learning the truth of science.